Welcome to the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world where we talk about board games. In this episode, we talk about some great games that come in small packages.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast. Pull up a chair and let me tell you a tale.
Since the beginning of time, stories have transported us to faraway lands,
Immortalized heroes long past,
taught us important lessons, and passed down wisdom.
and entertained countless generations.
A small book on a shelf can provide hours of entertainment, adventure, exploration, discovery, art, and culture.
Board games can provide a similar experience, along with challenges, puzzles, and a forum to compete and play with friends and family.
Who knows what mysteries, challenges, or arenas of combat we will find in that board game box on the shelf.
And the game doesn't have to be very big to provide hours of fun.
There are plenty of board games that pack a punch and come in a small package.
So please join us as we talk about how board games are bigger on the inside. Chris, have you ever heard the expression, "it's bigger on the inside"?
Ha! Are you kidding? Of course I have. Doctor Who, one of my favorite TV shows ever.
It's interesting. You Google that expression and you get nothing but Doctor Who references. And I thought that it was like a more generic expression, but it really is attributed to the TARDIS. It's all about that Palouse box.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Doctor Who is the longest running science fiction television show. It's been going for years and years, decades, and his ship is cloaked into the form of an old-timey telephone booth from the UK, a blue phone box, and they call it the TARDIS, which is time and relative dimension in space. And that's the ship that he uses to traverse different planets and actually go backwards and forwards in time.
So it's huge on the inside.
Yeah.
There's like a swimming pool and a study.
Yeah.
You only ever get to see the main cockpit, which is quite a bit larger than it is on the outside, but apparently it keeps going. The explanation they give in the show is it's dimensionally transcendental.
Right. And it's a running gag on the show, right? Is new humans will, be invited into the TARDIS, and the first time they walk in,
But it's huge.
they're like, whoa, it's bigger on the inside. Like, it's a huge room. It's
right.
not this tiny little box that you were expecting as you open the door.
It is very small outside. It's just in here it's big.
Board games are also dimensionally transcendental because they're these tiny little boxes on the shelf, and then you open them up and there's hours of entertainment, or there's an activity that we're constantly going back to.
It becomes this small little package that sits on your shelf, and attached to it are these fond memories that you have of spending time with your family and friends.
Yeah.
And there's this whole adventure and emotions that are wrapped up in this tiny little inanimate object that's just sitting there on your shelf, right?
Yeah. I picked that up and I'm reminded of that time when we all got together, that played that game and everybody laughed.
Yeah.
And it's weird how you attach these emotions and memories to a physical object.
Yeah. And it really does bring you joy, right? Like, I mean, even if you don't remember a specific gameplay, or even if it wasn't that momentous of an epic adventure, or, it's just an abstract game and you played it, you remember the people that you played with, and you remembered the good times, and you had fun.
Yeah.
And you remember laughing, but you don't remember what you laughed at, that kind of thing. That's where that connection comes with board games.
Absolutely.
And that's the idea, right? Is that board games also can be bigger on the inside. They can be dimensionally transcendental and provide us with so much more inside.
Yeah, they don't need to be these big boxes. I mean, sure, there are lots of big box games that are massive on the inside.
Yeah, we like big boxes.
Yeah, we sure do.
But this is about small boxes, maybe even a small price tag for the number of hours that you get of enjoyment from them. There's no smaller game on this list than this one. It may very well be the smallest game I own. It is pretty tiny, and it does pack a very big punch. IOTA. IOTA is a pattern-building, abstract strategy tile placement game for 2 to 4 players, ages 8 and up. It plays in about 30 minutes. IOTA was designed by Gene Mackles in 2012 and is currently being published by GameRite.
So how big is this?
I'm going to actually measure. It is 2 inches by about 2 inches and 1 inch wide.
Wow.
I love their little tagline for the game. It's the great big game in a teeny weeny tin. It's a game that comes in a tin. It's a card game. It's just cards. It's a tin with a lid, and, if you shake it, you've got the cards rattling around inside.
Sounds and looks like mints.
Yeah, it literally fits in anyone's pocket. You can bring it anywhere at any time. There are 60 different cards, I believe, 60 or 64 different cards, and they're all completely different. They all have 3 different elements on them. They either have one of 4 different colors, one of 4 different shapes, and one of 4 different numbers. And so there's no 2 cards that are identical in the deck.
Okay.
What you're doing is a card starts face up on the middle of the table, and on your turn, you add 1 or more cards to a row or a column to create a pattern that exists in that row or column.
Sure.
And every card you play has to follow those rules, and the rows and columns have to follow those rules. So you can have cards that are all the same or all different in some way. So you would have a yellow, a red, a blue, and a green, and then 4 different numbers. And that would be a legal kind of move. But you can also have all the same. So you could have cards that are all circles or all crosses, and that's allowed as well. So if you put a card that intersects between a row and a column, that's great because you're scoring that card twice, first of all.
Right.
But it also has to comply with the different elements of each row. So if one row is all squares, then the card you're placing has to be squares. And if the row that you're placing it into is all green, then it has to be a green square, for example.
Right. Okay, so this sounds a little bit like Quirkle.
Yeah, it is a lot like Quirkle. And in fact, when we play it, people will often say this is like Quirkle on steroids.
Yeah, because now we're dealing with 3 different elements, right?
Exactly.
Not just the shape and the color, but the number of pips on each symbol.
Yeah.
And you were saying so there's only 1 of each.
Yeah.
So there'll only be 1 green triangle with 4 pips in it.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
And in Quirkle, you can kind of look at, okay, there's 3
Of each.
red circles. I've got 2 more that I could possibly get to make this match. Where in this game, there's many a time where adding another card to a row, there's only 1 card. And if it's been played somewhere else, no one can add to that row.
Yeah.
That's done.
So does it take up a lot of space on the table because you're having to spread out more? There's more columns?
No, the cards are tiny. The cards are tiny. The cards are, 1.5 inches or something like that.
Oh, wow.
It takes up probably less space than Quirkle. Comparing it to Quirkle is obviously the first one that stands out.
Sure.
But it's surprising. So Quirkle has 6 different shapes and 6 different colors, and IOTA has only 4.
Yeah.
But adding in that 3rd dimension of the numbers on each card really adds a lot in terms of what you're able to do. Because what ends up happening in a game of IOTA is you'll play a card thinking, oh, there we go, I'm going to get lots of points. This is the perfect spot for that card. And everyone else at the table goes, nope, you can't go there. And you're like, what? Oh, yeah, it's got 2. Oh, okay, I can't put that. Oh, right.
Right. Wrong number of pips on there.
Yeah, so you pick it up, and then you're like, okay, I'll put it over here. And they're like, nope, that's a yellow card. You can't put that. Oh, right. So there's a lot of that.
Wow.
It is a very thinky game. Like you spend a lot of time thinking about it and thinking about your turn and trying to find the exact place. And the other thing you can do on your turn, like Quirkle, is discard cards, right? You can kind of skip your turn and get rid of cards and draw up a new hand. And
what size is your hand? How many cards do you get?
I got to look it up. Hang on a sec. It's also the world's tiniest rule book.
It's got to fit in that tiny little box.
It does. It's like folded up like 18 times, this tiny little piece of paper.
That's hilarious.
4 cards to each player.
Yeah,
Everything is 4. That makes sense. Okay. So hand limit is 4 cards. Everything in this game seems to be based around 4. All the numbers just go from 1 to 4. The colors are 1 to 4 colors.
And there's 4 different shapes.
And when you play a card, you can play 1 card, 2 cards, 3 cards, or a maximum of 4 cards. Once a row or a column has all 4 different cards that are different or all the same, then no one else can add to that row or column.
Right.
In some ways, it spreads out a little bit more. You kind of end up doing like these sort of stair shapes,
Yeah.
2 cards, 2 cards, 2 cards to make stairs, and then you build off that. What you can do on your turn is discard cards, like Quirkle. You can discard and draw back up. You skip your turn, of course. But the difference is with Quirkle is a lot of people don't really do that because you're giving up an opportunity to score 4, 5, 6, 7 points,
Yeah.
And you're doing that throughout the game. And Quirkle is quite close in scoring by the end, usually. That you miss 2 or 3 turns of that, and you've put yourself behind the 8 ball in terms of scoring. So that's a rule that a lot of people in Quirkle don't use. In IOTA, it becomes a very, very big strategic point.
Because you want to get those sets, right?
You want to get sets.
Like those 2, 3, 4 cards that are all the same. You can play them at the same time.
Yeah. And all of that is because of scoring. Scoring in Quirkle is done by you put 1 tile, you get 1 point, basically, right?
In Quirkle, you score the whole row.
You score the whole row, but you're scoring 1 point for each tile.
Yeah.
In IOTA, you are scoring the points on the card. So it could be 1 point, it could be up to 4 points.
Oh, the pips are points.
Yes, but when you complete a set of 4, you actually double your score.
Cool.
It's double for the entire turn. So now if you've placed a card that completes a row and maybe it completes a column, or maybe it adds to a column.
Yeah.
You're adding up the 4, the 3, the 2, and then you add up the 4 again, and the 3, the 2, and the 1, and that's your score, and then you double it. And because you added, you're going to double it again.
Wow.
So you get to double it twice. So getting 6 or 7 points on a turn isn't very much in IOTA. It's, early maybe and probably late in the game when you don't have as many options. But in the middle of the game, you're looking to score 30, 40, 50 points.
Oh, wow.
If you can. It's hard. I'm not saying it isn't. But yeah, so that's what you're doing with that. So setting up a future turn can become really, really strategic. And you can push your luck, drop 2 or 3 cards to hope to get that really big play down the road.
Yeah.
So it becomes much more of a strategic game, I think, than Quirkle does in some ways.
Very cool. Yeah. I've seen this around, and I didn't realize there was so much game in that tiny little tin.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I like it, but I don't love it because I find it tiring, to be honest.
Yeah, it sounds really thinky, right?
Yeah.
Like it sounds like it could be exhausting.
At the end of it, it's kind of like, okay, I feel like I played a game of Through the Ages, or I played Zia or something like that. It's like,
wow.
I'm tired. I've played this really, really long game. And, it doesn't take long to play. It says about 30 minutes. It might be 40, 45, because there is a lot of downtime with people thinking about their turn and that kind of thing.
Right.
Or worse, you're not thinking about your turn, or you think you've thought about what you're going to do on your turn, and then you play it, and someone goes, no, you can't do that. So you have to, oh, no, I have to re-strategize. You're right, I can't put it there.
And then you've got the stress of people waiting for their turn because you've going to rethink your turn from the beginning again.
Yeah.
That can be stressful.
So that's IOTA. I like to bring it out when somebody says, oh, I really like Quirkle. I want to sort of show them what else that very simple, abstract, shapes and colors and numbers, what you can do with it, because it really expands quite a bit on Quirkle.
I don't think we can talk about big games in small packages without talking about the Tiny Epic Games series.
And it wouldn't be appropriate to call this episode Bigger on the Inside and not have some sort of science fiction theme.
That's right.
Some sort of science and space kind of theme going on in the episode.
Tiny Epic Galaxies. Tiny Epic Galaxies is a dice-rolling, track movement, open drafting, space exploration game for 1 to 5 players, ages 14 and up, that plays in about 40 minutes. Tiny Epic Galaxies was designed by Scott Almes and published by Gameland Games in 2015. The Tiny Epic series has been going on for a while. I'm not sure how many of these games are in the series now. I want to say like 12. That's just a guess.
That's a good question.
What would be your guess, Chris? How many Tiny Epic games are out there?
I'm going to go for 14 because I feel like there's
mechs, there's zombies, there's defenders.
There's a Tiny Epic for anything you want.
Yeah. The Western, there's a Tiny Epic Western.
Tiny Epic architectures. Tiny Epic swimmers. Tiny Epic.
Tiny Epic flower arrangement.
Yeah, exactly. No, I have no idea. That's probably something we could look up. Oh. What? Oh, this is all. Never mind. We're not going to put this in the show. There's a lot of expansions and stuff. So
how many Tiny Epic games are there?
64.
Tactics, dinosaurs,
crimes, kingpins, defenders,
zombies,
dungeons,
westerns,
mechs,
kingdoms. Each of the games is about the size of 2 decks of cards.
Yeah.
Right? You know those double decks of cards that come in the little box with the lid that opens? But that's,
yeah.
How would you describe this size?
Yeah, no, that's perfect, actually. The box itself is just a teeny tiny bit bigger than one of those double deck of cards packages that we used to buy in the 80s.
And inside the box, you'll find 7 custom dice, a deck of cards representing planets you will explore. Each player will get cubes for keeping track of resources and little teeny tiny wooden spaceships. And there's also play mats for every player. These mats represent your empire. And there's tracks along them to keep track of your energy, your culture, and the level of your empire. Everybody starts with their empire at level 1, and as you improve your empire, you get more ships, and you get to roll more dice. This is basically a dice rolling game, and you're drafting these dice and using these dice to take actions. One of the actions is move. If you roll a move die, you can move your ships from your empire onto cards that are out on the table. There's always going to be 2 more cards than the number of players. So in a 2-player game, you're going to have 4 cards out there, and each card is a different planet.
Right.
And these planets need to be colonized or exploited. In a lot of ways, this game feels like a 2X game.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like it is the expand and the exploit portions of a 4X game. There's not much exterminating going on, and there's not much exploring going on, but you're definitely going out, colonizing these planets and using their resources in order to make your empire better.
Yeah. For such a small game, the artwork is fantastic. Like the planets look gorgeous and exciting. The little player mats are really well done. Like when this game came out, I'd never seen player mats done quite like this. It almost looks like a heads-up display, like a HUD.
Oh, yeah.
In a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
And that's where you keep track of your resources and where you are and your points and that kind of thing.
Agreed. Yeah. I love games that have these tracks in them and keep track of your resources for sure. But as you're increasing the level of your empire, you get to roll more dice. You get to have more ships. And all of that's right there along that track. That little meter there is easily read. I think you put your spaceships on level 3 and on level 5. And so when you upgrade your empire to level 3, there's a spaceship right next to it. And you get to take that off, add it to your empire, and now you've got more ships to fly around.
Yeah, they're very intuitive the way they're laid out. It's quite good.
My only complaint is that they're a bit small because they're trying to fit everything into this box. It could have easily been twice the size, or maybe there's a deluxe version out there. We get like a recessed board. Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice.
So that the pieces wouldn't move around if you bumped it.
Yeah. I think this game still holds up for the best package. Like when you open it up, you're impressed. Like there are 16 different rocket ships. There's wooden cubes and discs. There's dice. There's a deck of cards.
Yeah.
There's these player mats. There's these little planets on them, the rule book. Everything fits in this very, very tiny box. It's really well done.
Yeah.
When they designed this game, they really thought about how to package it.
You're right. Yeah.
As a graphic design nerd, I get excited by that. And I see the attention to detail there.
Yeah, and you're right. And I really enjoy the cards. Each of the cards has the name of the planet, which is always a weird sci-fi sounding thing that's hard to pronounce. But the art's always interesting.
Yeah.
It looks inhabitable, or maybe it doesn't look habitable, like it's a gas giant. And then there's that track on each of the planets. So when you want to colonize these planets in order to make them part of your empire, you have to land your ship on them and then keep spending either diplomacy or economy, which are two sides of the dice that you can roll, in order to colonize these planets and bring them into your empire.
Yeah, and it's like that thing my father always said, anything worth doing it's going to take some time, and that's represented in the game. Some planets are a little bit more welcoming and easier to convince or exploit, and others are less so, and they take more time and work to get them to come onto your side and convince them.
Each of the planets, once they're part of your colony, are worth victory points, but they also offer you a special ability. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So the 6 dice faces are move, energy, culture. The energy and culture are currencies which you can spend. And then you've got the diplomacy and economy, which you use to colonize the different planets. And then colonize is the 6th face of the die. And so you're taking each of these currencies and adding them to your board and keeping track of how much you have. And then you can spend the energy to re-roll some dice, or you can spend the energy to upgrade your colony. Tiny Epic Galaxies has this mechanism called follow, where when another player takes an action that you want to play, you can take that action if you spend 1 culture, which is one of the things you're collecting throughout the game. Well, so that's kind of fun. You can actually upgrade your colony when another player rolls the colony die.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, oh, I want to do that too. I'm going to spend a culture to follow that action, and then I'm going to spend 3 energy to upgrade to level 3 colony. Or I'm going to spend 4 energy to upgrade to the level 4 colony.
Yeah.
And then by the time it comes back to you again, now you've got more dice and more ships to play on your turn.
I love the mechanism follow. It's the one thing that when I'm talking to people who are, familiar with maybe Catan or Risk or Monopoly, that kind of thing, it's one of the things that I use as a selling feature to try new games. Like in Scrabble, this is always my example, is it takes forever for someone to think of just the right word to score them 52 points. And, you waited there on your turn with your 3-letter word that you could make.
Yeah.
For 27 minutes while the other player took their turn. Follow is this thing that just keeps everybody engaged or somewhat engaged when it's not their turn. For me, that's a big, important thing, and it's a fun thing, and it makes the games fun. The only thing I don't like about follow is the name.
Oh, yeah. It's a bit confusing.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a command. We're not going to all get up and leave the room together. I would like someone to come up with a better idea for naming the follow mechanism in board games.
Too late. It's already in Board Game Geek. It's
Too
already
late.
been, it's nomenclature now.
Okay.
The game continues playing like this until somebody reaches 21 points.
It's a short, but there's a lot of game there.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of thinking, a lot of interesting decisions, and it's a teeny tiny little box.
Yeah.
It's bigger on the inside. Now, Scott Almes, who designed this game, he is known for creating these quite brilliant, tiny little box games that are thoughtful and interesting.
Yeah.
His games tend to be, this sort of small box, small footprint, and offering an interesting take on a combination of mechanisms and choices. And it does a good job that way.
We're going to get back to the show after a brief message. This next ad is for Chris's own company, Geeky Goodies. If you'd like to hear what an ad for your product, game, or website might sound like, Escape Into Board Games is looking for sponsors. Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. When we escape into board games, we're always wearing our Geeky Goodies t-shirts.
They are great conversation starters for gamers and non-gamers.
But did you know that they also sell drink coasters, socks, mouse pads, cupcake toppers, and so much more?
All things board games.
All things geeky.
Visit geekygoodies.com and use coupon code ESCAPE for a 10% discount off your purchase.
Sometimes when I'm at work, I'll meet a colleague that also plays board games, and we will start chatting about our favorite games and compare notes on who likes what. And I'll never forget, I ran into this one editor friend of mine, and first of all, I was surprised to learn that him and his family played heavy hobby board games a lot.
Cool.
And then they had discovered Caverna.
Okay.
Which I think, in my opinion, is not one of the heaviest games, but considerably heavier game than the games we're talking about today.
Sure.
They found this game, and him and his wife and his son played it religiously. Like, that was just the game that they played. They just keep coming back to the same game over and over and over again. And Caverna is a great game for that, because it's one of these sandbox games where you're mining and farming and exploring and going on expeditions, and you can do any of those things in any order you want. And there's the challenge of feeding your dwarves and making sure that you're ready for the harvest and stuff like that. But it's one of these games where you can just go anywhere at any time, right? You just go in any direction you want. And it really feels like it's a simulator as opposed to a board game. There's all these things you have to do, but then there's all these things that you can do and a lot of different ways that you can do it. And here this guy was just exploring it every weekend with his family, the same game over and over and over again. And I just find that thrilling. I just think that's so great that you can do that. I mean, certainly you could sit down and watch your favorite movie every weekend, or you can sit down and read your favorite book every weekend.
Yeah.
But this is truly this deep dive into the mechanisms and the way that the systems interact with each other, and then with the way that the players interact with those systems affects how you are going to interact with those systems. And there's all these different elements and angles to come back to again and again just to explore this one simple game on repeat.
Yeah.
And I'm a guy that likes to play a different game every day. I want to play something new. I want to explore a different system, and I want to see all that fun discovery.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said for coming back to the same game and rediscovering and re-exploring the different things you missed.
Yeah. I'm like you. I like to play new games, but there are certain ones that I just keep gravitating back towards.
Yeah.
And, I have some that sit on my shelf and I play them once a year. I have some that I'll play every 2 or 3 years. And, if someone comes over and they're like, can we play that game? I'm like, no, I'm not ready to teach that. Sorry. I haven't played it in 3 years. So
that's right.
But we could play it next week. I just need time to review the rules. A game that is not like that and sort of fits in with what your friend was saying. We keep gravitating back towards it, but it's because it's such a thoughtful, interesting game. But it's really, really easy to teach. So you can come back to it regularly, or you can put it on the shelf for years.
Nice. Yeah.
And there's very, very few rules, and it just makes it get back to the table much more often. And if we play with a lot of people who are new or medium new to the hobby, so this is a good one to pull out. Mini Rails. Mini Rails is a network-building, stock-holding economic train game for 3 to 5 players, ages 13 and up, that plays in about 50 minutes. Mini Rails was designed by Mark Garretts and published by Mo Ideas in 2017. It's the golden age of railroads, an age of steel and paper. Railroad tracks are sprouting up all over the country, and stock certificates are selling like hotcakes. You've already built your fortune, but now it's time to build something even more lasting, a reputation. Players are wealthy investors speculating on the fortunes of local railroad companies, each attempting to increase their wealth by manipulating stock prices. This is a good little beginner game for people who are interested in train games.
Yeah.
Train games can be quite big and complicated and intimidating, perhaps, with lots of rules. And this one is the opposite of all of that. Very small, not intimidating, and very few rules that you have to adhere to.
Now, Chris, when you say a train game, you're not talking about Ticket to Ride.
That's an excellent point. It's definitely not like Ticket to Ride. I would say that somewhere between a train game and Ticket to Ride lies Mini Rails. Ticket to Ride is more of a set collection hand management game where you happen to be building routes, right?
Yeah.
Whereas most train games are economic in nature. They are route building for sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're surrounded by sort of real world considerations about going through terrain and economic strategies and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so do all train games have a stock component?
That's a good question. I'm not someone who's played a lot of these train games.
Yeah.
I'm more familiar with them than having played them.
Yeah, same with me. I've heard of 18XX games, which are like 1842 and 1891, and they're all about trains and route building, but they are very much economic games with stocks, and each of them plays differently, and they're all pretty heavy games, if it's my understanding, right?
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the rules, or you're not a good player, you're a new player, and you're playing against someone who's played it a lot, you can lose and even kind of spoil the experience for some of the other players because your decision lets someone else win,
Right.
You're a very obviously poor decision because you're a newbie.
And the economy is tight, and it's crucial
very tight.
to have that understanding. Interesting. Okay.
But generally, I think that, there is usually some sort of economic proportion, whether it's goods or stocks or that kind of thing, or the value of your company. And that is true in Mini Rails. And Mini Rails, in a lot of ways, is more of an economic game than it is a train game. It has a modular board, so you start by laying out these tiles that have little hexes on them. And the shape that you make is this 1 foot by 1 foot big hexagon with these little hexes inside each hex. And there are 6 train companies. They start at different parts of the board, and they are all sort of building out towards the center of the board where the more valuable spaces are in the game. Nobody owns any of the companies to start.
Right.
And a lot like Ticket to Ride. In Ticket to Ride, there's like 3 things you can do on your turn. In Mini Rails, there's 2. And the game plays over 6 rounds. And each round, you're going to do both of the 2 things you can do on your turn. You're going to do them both 1 time each.
Yeah.
And that's it. Once everyone's done both of the 2 things, that round ends and we move to the next one. The 2 things that you can do on your turn is either buy stock in a company, and then the second thing you can do is expand a rail. Train companies don't even have names in this game.
Right. This is red, yellow, blue, white.
Exactly. It would just make it more complicated. And this game is all about its simplicity in terms of its approachability anyway. So you buy stock in the red company, and then everyone else does their turn. And then when it comes back around to you, you can then build the red company. And you do that by taking one of these discs and you add it to the board. It has to be adjacent to where the red train rail already exists.
Right.
And you add it to one of the hexes. And all the hexes on the board either have red pips like a die or white. If they're white, that means the stock for the red company goes up.
Right.
If they're red, the stock for the red company goes down. The same is true for all the colors. So if I am adding to the blue company's track and I put it on a spot that has 3 white pips, that means everybody who owns blue, including me, gets to add 3 to the value of their blue stock. So you have this little player board and you move all your blue discs up by 3.
Right.
And depending where you bought those blue discs, you can buy more than 1 stock of blue company. And one might be worth 6 points and one might be worth 1. And now you add 3 to that. So the one that was worth 1 is now 4, and the one that was worth 6 is now worth 9. And that's how it goes.
Yeah.
And then someone else may come and they may add to the blue company, and they may add it to a red pip spot to bring it down.
Okay.
They might do that because their blue stock isn't worth nearly as much as yours. They might do it because they don't have any blue stock
at all. Yeah.
Exactly. And the other factor is you only have 2 things to do on your turn.
Yeah.
You're going to buy stock and you're going to build rail.
If you've already bought stock in your previous turn, well, on this turn, you have to build rail.
Right. Exactly. There's one and then the other. So the game moves quite fast, but It's an interesting decision, and you get to see what your opponents are doing because they're either buying stocks of companies they have and then building rail in that to make their own stocks go up, which is one basic strategy, or they're buying stocks of companies that they have, hoping other people will build rail for them and make it bigger. And they're adding tracks that are negative points that, kind of go in a bad spot, and it costs time and money on the map for that company to go down because you have it or someone who's winning has it. And you really see that sort of tough decision is like, if I'm hurting other players at the table, I'm not helping myself. So there's this sort of unspoken teaming up, like, oh, okay, I have white, you have white, and Sherry has white, but Mark and Danielle have yellow. So do I want to attack Mark and Danielle's yellow?
Yeah.
Or do I want us to all go up? And if we all go up the same amount, am I getting anywhere, right? Maybe I need to invest in blue because your value of white stocks is already higher than mine. And anytime white goes up, we all go up. So I'm just giving you points. So it's this really, really interesting mechanism.
It's not like you have all the choices in the world on your turn either. You can't choose from any stock at any given time. In a 3-player game, you're going to pull out 6 discs from a bag. And those are the stocks we're going to be dealing with on this round. They could be 2 blue, a yellow, a white.
Or they could be all of one color. Or almost all of one color. The companies are chosen quite at random, so you have to predict to it. And where they come out determines player order for the next turn, which I always think is such an interesting decision.
I love we see that in King Domino too, where if you select the one stock at the top of the track, then you get to go first in the next round, which is really, really clever. That could help you decide between 2 different stocks.
But your white stock might not be to the end. And now you've got to make this decision. Do I invest in something that I don't really want or move track of something that I don't really want just so that I can go first in the next round? Or do I go last because that's the thing I really want to do?
Yeah, I love that.
And if that was all the game was about, it would be, mildly interesting. What ends up happening, though, is every round, 1 extra disc is pulled out. And that extra disc becomes the round counter. It's kind of like this timing mechanism for when the game ends.
Yeah.
And like I said before, it's 6 rounds. And what happens is the disc that comes out, the color disc that comes out, is that company pays taxes. And if your company pays taxes, then at the end of the game, all of your negative scores from that company get removed. So you don't have to, I have a blue 4 and a blue -2. I can remove the blue -2 because the blue company paid taxes this game and my score is 4. I don't have to subtract the -2. And the opposite is true. If your company didn't pay taxes because some other company paid taxes 2 or 3 times, then your positive scoring discs get removed and your negative ones stay on the board.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden you're taking your positive 4 points and you're subtracting 7 for white because they didn't pay taxes the whole game. And you're at a negative score.
Yeah.
That is such a neat and interesting element to this game. And I find that the game is so short. That's the part that makes you keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Because you've played it and you've gone, oh, now I get the whole concept and how important it is to leave an extra disc so that, I'm heavily invested in the Green Train Company and I have tons of stock in them, but it looks like they're not going to pay any taxes. All of that stock's going to be worthless.
Yeah.
No matter how hard I work to get them as valuable a company, they're going to be worthless at the end of the game because they didn't pay any tax and they're going to get hammered on taxes at the end of the game.
And you were saying the game is only 6 rounds, but it's interesting when we're looking at the companies that have paid taxes around round 4. That's when that really comes into play. And
exactly.
Feel like, white has to pay taxes. I've got 10 points in white. If white doesn't pay taxes in the next 3 rounds, I'm not going to score those points.
Right.
And then you can also look at the negative points that you're getting. Oh, there's no way this red disc is going to make it to 0 before the end of the game. I need to pay taxes on red so I can blow this debt away and not have to worry about it. And then you're looking at your opponent. He's like, wow, look at all the yellow they have.
Exactly.
Well, if I draft this yellow and then somebody else drafts that yellow, then yellow's not going to pay taxes this round and those points are going to go away. And it just changes the whole game halfway through. We're doing the same two actions, but now we're focusing on something else.
Yeah, you're focusing on the end game as well.
So clever.
It's so clever. It's, the word that a lot of board gamers toss around is elegant design.
That's it.
This game is literally the definition of an elegant design.
It really is. It's so simple.
The board itself is tiny. It's about a foot. You assemble it. It's modular. It's double-sided tiles. So you've got some replayability.
Nice.
The rules, you're explaining it. It's like, you can do this. You can do this. We're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to know anything else.
Yeah.
The rest is just strategy. If you want to learn how to play, I can tell you a little bit more, like how to win.
Yeah.
But you already know how to play because I explained you do this or you do this.
So simple.
And the rest is just how to win. And who you play with makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Because you can see the way they're attacking their opponents, or they're just focusing on their own companies, or they're doing this mix of these two companies or three companies. And you've got tons of strategies, and the way the colors of those discs come out really affects every single round. At the beginning of the first round, you might be like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I'll buy this one and I'll do this one. I'll buy that one.
See what happens. Just push buttons.
Yeah.
See what happens.
But, the second and third time you play it, you're like, oh, I go first in the first round. I've got a strategy. There's three white discs. I'm going to take an early lead with white, or something like that. And, you want to leave them out so that they pay their taxes, right? So if you can do that early, you're soaring, right?
Yes.
And it's up to your opponents to go, oh, he's heavily invested in white. I better get some white as well. And maybe we'll pay taxes later. There's so many ways that this game can go with two simple little rules that you do on your turn. And it's a big hit. I bring it out. We haven't played too much with people who are new to the hobby, but it works well in that situation because the rules are so simple.
Sure.
But it works really, really well with people who have been gaming for a few years and are, have played Ticket to Ride and have played other games, and they're like, I want to try something a little meatier. And you pull it out, and it's a small box. It's, I don't know, maybe 12 inches, 10 inches by 10 inches,
Yeah.
It doesn't take up much room on the shelf, and it doesn't take up a lot of room on the table. And like I said, you've explained it in 30 seconds, and you're ready to play. And it's over. It's over in, 20 minutes. And depending on how many players, it can be over in 20 minutes.
Right.
It's very good. Highly, highly recommend Mini Rails. It's such a good game. I get so excited talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It always surprises me when you play something like that and you're like, well, how long has this been around?
Yeah.
Why did it take so long to come up with this simple, elegant, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a beautiful game, but it's just so simple. Like, it's so distilled to its core, like that economic root building. That's what it is. It's just economics and roots. There's stocks. We're building. It's just like so simple, and yet, no, it's brand new. It's cutting edge technology.
Yeah, distilled is a good word for it. Mini Rails to me is the prime example of that kind of thinking in terms of game design, because
Agreed.
There's nothing in this game that's superfluous or is unneeded, or there's no, ooh, that's a shiny little piece sticking out in the middle of the board. Why is that there? It's not a bad looking game. Like, the artwork is.
Oh no, it's great. Yeah,
it's very functional though. It's not going to win, most beautiful game of the year award.
No. Yeah. Elegant, maybe.
Milligan, yes.
I think there's a real acknowledgement to the board game design recently trying to accomplish this. Let's try to fit as much game as we can with as minimal components, a minimal footprint, minimal box size, or a minimal amount of time. Let's try to fit in this epic game in a tiny amount of time.
I'm really excited about this one.
Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes. Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes is an area-majority, tug-of-war, worker placement World War II game for 2 players, ages 14 and up, that plays in about 20 minutes. Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes was designed by Paulo Mori and released in 2019 as part of the 20-minute series from PCS Games. Two players battle across World War II's most iconic theaters, winning key campaigns and building military might. Players allocate their military resources to each theater's campaigns, winning victory points, further resources, special weapons, and strategic advantages as they play. Refight World War II several times in one evening.
Wow, that sounds exciting. Like, I want to play this game. It sounds so good.
It is, again, one of these distilled games, simple and it's elegant. In between the players is the player board, which represents the 5 theaters of war. Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the Pacific Ocean, Africa and the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Each of these theaters has a tug-of-war sort of mechanism along the top, a track that keeps track of the military might that you've applied there. So if you were to take one of your tanks and put it in there, then you get to move that chit 3 spaces in your direction. Each of these tokens that you get, you pull from a bag. You start with 3, you pull 3 from the bag, and those are the ones you're dealing with. The bag has got tanks, ships, some airplanes, and a general or 2. Each of these tokens will have a number on it, which will correspond to its military might. When you play them on the board, you not only get to apply that military might to that theater's battle track, but each place that you can put a token will have a special ability that you will also get. For example, you could put your token on industrial production, which will allow you to pull another token out of the bag. Or you could play on top of aerial bombing, which will have your opponent remove a random unit from their reserve. Some squares will have a tactical advantage, which will advance you along the battle track. Or maybe propaganda, which will give you victory points. It's really interesting, this tug of war, this push and pull between you and the other player. It is a very, very well-balanced game.
I like that left and right track that keeps track of you and your opponent. And I love how the one cube, it kind of sways left and right depending on what you're doing in each region.
Yeah.
I love that idea in games.
And it's really neat because there's 5 different theaters, 5 different battlefields, 5 different tracks happening. What'll happen is there'll be a little bit of responding to what your opponent is doing, right? If they've put a big military presence in Eastern Europe, well, you're going to want to combat that to get that cube closer back to the middle again. Because if it goes too far to the other side, then your opponent's going to win lots of points.
Right.
And the first person to 25 points is going to win the game.
Right.
But then there's also, you get those bonuses depending on where the tokens go. So each of the theaters has 3 stages. And during the first stage of any theater, you can only place the token in the top row. And each of the spots in the top row has a different ability and requirement. Sometimes you have to put a boat on the blue spaces. Sometimes you have to put a tank on the brown spaces because land versus water.
Right.
But you can put airplanes on either of those spaces, which is kind of interesting. There's a little bit of luck going on, right? When you're pulling out those tokens, you could pull out a bunch of weak tokens off the bat, right? Right. So your early game could be very weak and you have to compensate for that. And your opponent could kind of run away a little bit with the game if the tokens don't work out in your favor.
Such as war. War is hell.
That's right. I don't know if there's a way to mitigate that kind of luck, but of course, the more crappy tokens you pull out of the bag, the more really good tokens are going to be left for future turns.
And what I imagine is the armament that's on the token really makes a difference too, right? Like the Pacific region needs a lot more water-based assault.
That's right.
Than they do need land. So if you're pulling out all these tanks, you're like, okay, we're going to Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. And that's, again, it kind of represents the fog of war element. You have to use what you're given.
Yeah. And, that's a real life war decision, right? We don't have enough iron to build ships. So we've built tanks and, we're going to focus on this front.
Yeah.
We'll fight them on the land.
There are special weapons that you can upgrade. Certain spots on the board, if you apply forces there, will allow you to draft tokens face down from a pile. And some of those tokens could be more powerful planes, more powerful tanks, maybe an aircraft carrier, or a nuclear bomb.
Oh, okay. How does that work?
Right? When you place your tank or your plane or combat on a certain spot on the board, it allows you to draft from these special tiles, which are face down, and it's a special weapon, upgraded weapon. You draft that tile, and then you put it in your bag.
Okay.
If on future turns you pull that tile out, that's when you get to use it.
Cool.
When you place the nuclear bomb, advance 7 spaces on the theater of operation battle track. So tanks are 4, planes are 1 or 2, but the nuclear bomb is worth 7 points. And so pretty much just guaranteeing you winning any theater that it goes off in.
Yeah.
And so you can completely win that theater, but you have to retreat 2 spaces on all other theater of operations that are not yet closed as a penalty, right? Because come on.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Setting off nuclear bombs is wrong.
Yeah, the whole world unites in their outrage against you, hopefully.
This is one of those games that it's so elegant and simple. You're teaching it in a few minutes. The tokens have a symbology on it, which is easy to understand. And each player has a player screen to protect the tokens from being spied on by your opponent. But that screen also has the nomenclature and little guides on there to keep you from being too confused.
Cool.
Yeah, I really like that it is this epic feeling conflict game, but it is in 20 minutes. It's a tight 20-minute game.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised by how they're able to do that.
That's insane. Like, have this World War II feeling, this war that went on for almost 5 years.
Yeah.
We're going to play it in 20 minutes. Are you ready? That's great. How big is a box? Like, I don't know anything about what it looks like. No, so it's like 10 inches by 10 inches, it's about the same size as mini rails that we just talked about.
Yeah, it's about the same size as mini rails. It's tiny.
Yeah.
I like this box size.
Yeah.
Games don't need to be much bigger than that.
No, that sounds really, really neat.
We have to get that to the table.
Obviously, we've got to schedule a 2-player game night, you and I, because this has to be on my list of must play.
Nice.
Blitzkrieg. Sounds fantastic. Does your version come with the Nippon expansion?
It does. I haven't played it.
I saw in that there's a Godzilla tile. I want to play this. I want to play this so bad.
Yes. The Nippon expansion adds a new challenge to Blitzkrieg. What if the Axis coalition had won World War II and Germany invaded and occupied the United States of America? And what if Japan then turned on its former ally and invaded German-held America with the help of Godzilla?
Well, that sounds like a fun alternate reality. I would totally play that. I almost am more interested in that part of the game than I am in the actual World War II game.
It's delightfully silly. I want to try the next one in this series called Dogfight.
Air battles.
Rule the skies in 20 minutes. And it's biplanes, like it's the old school propeller biplanes.
I wonder if the Baron is in that.
I was going to say the Red Baron and Snoopy. That would be my...
Yeah, Snoopy could be the Godzilla. There we go. This stuff writes itself. For this company, they have got their expansion set.
Let's contact PSC Games.
Yes, let's advocate for Snoopy.
Have you played any of the games that we've talked about today? What's your favorite game that comes in a small package? Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape Into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Escape Into Board Games. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. It helps more people discover Escape Into Board Games. You can get an Escape Into Board Games t-shirt at geekygoodies.com/escape. Or you can help us fuel the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/escape into BGS.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Sound editing by Matt McKenzie. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yasut, Daniel Carlton, and Roman Senyek. See you at the next Escape.